For coming out. My name is Cleve Corner. I'm the manager of author and speaking engagement here at the Pratt Library. The folks we have in the room and say hi to the folks who are watching. I also want to thank very quickly our booksellers tonight, Snug Books. Having purchased the book, please do so. Roland will be happy to see them after the program. Tonight, Roland will speak for about 45 minutes, and we'll have your questions. Please thinking of this. Also, cannot forget that I wore these Converse shoes today in honor of the program. I was telling Roland to divulge my basketball nerddom and tell Roland that I remember very clearly Magical Birds advertising, which was their two birds. Lazenby library discussing the book Magic, The Life of Magic Johnson. And he looked at it was easily scandalized, but it then turned his legendary will, rising as such much more. Lazenby's portrayal of Johnson's becomes bigger than that. Not just fancy asking about America itself. Friends and love. So rich in basketball and cultural lore. Magic gives us key characters in a way, the history of our time and the green. And author Peter Goldenbach, commented that Magic deserves to be the first sports biography to ever win a Pulitzer. Sure. It's expensive. We have no idea that sports biography is ever win a Pulitzer Prize. Author Roland has written a masterpiece combining incredible research, a remarkable story of tragedy, and a beautiful narrative to produce a timeless classic about one of the most fascinating athletes of the past. It's my great pleasure to welcome soon-to-be Pulitzer Prize winning author Roland Lazenby.
People are coming out. I want to thank Pratt CEO Garcia Grant, Cleve, Neil Nath, and his fabulous staff at the library. They've done a wonderful job, and it's a special moment. A library is a powerful thing. You have to forgive me. I'm going to read some comments. I'm here 48 years, and I because I tend to struggle a bit sometimes. I talking about one thing or another in my books, and if you see her sort of frowning at me, she's trying to get me back in place. Anyway, a library is a powerful thing, which means this is a huge honor for me, one that's quite personal. When I was a boy, my father helped open a little storefront library in our town, Whiteville, Virginia. That's in the far southwest of Virginia, the Blue Ridge Mountains. My father was actually chairman of that library He dedicated much of his adult life to expanding it. In the 1970s, he and another man planned and built, I mean literally built, doing a lot of the work, the new Wythe County Library. It has served that community for a half century. The first librarian of that little storefront facility was a lady named Odie Gibson. Her son, Billy, is known today as science fiction author William Gibson, a Hugo Award winner, a futurist, and one of the brilliant minds of the baby boom generation. He was right there. So, like I said, it's a powerful thing. It certainly was for my father. He didn't get to go to college. He had an offer of a basketball scholarship and was set to go. That's something that had the Great Depression after he graduated high school. His father died. My father had younger siblings, so instead of going to school, we went to work with loading docks at Bluefield Supply Company to help support the family. In 1945, my father came home from the Army, bought a small business about supporting his family. 2 months later, burned horribly in a house accident. Third-degree burns over 60%. Funeral arrangements were somehow survived and spent 18 long months in a Veterans Administration hospital in Richmond. Skin grafts he needed. His doctor figured he survived because he was a bit young and he lost basketball. 6 years after his terrible injury, I was when I was a small boy, he began the volunteer storefront. His injuries had meant that he and my mother. After that, he took a job as a traveling sales job and his family. But his volunteer work at the library was the thing that fed his soul. As I said, the library is a powerful thing. That is my father's story, but it is also one shared by many others who have dedicated their own lives in one fashion or another to libraries, including people. I am here tonight to talk about my new Magic Johnson biography, my other biographies of Michael Jordan, Jerry West, and Phil Jackson. I'm eager to do that, but first I want to talk about John Thompson and Reggie Lewis. Uh, After my father's death in 1981, I began playing even more pickup basketball and writing about the game. My first book in 1983 was the story of Samson at the University of Virginia. In 1984, John Thompson's Georgetown Poetry championship, and the coach gave me my first huge career opportunity when he approved me as the writer of the championship story of his poets. He had read my Samson book and liked it. John Thompson, of course, had once played for the Boston Celtics and was quite close with another figure from the area, the legendary. A few years later, I moved from writing about college basketball to the NBA with a project about those Celtics of Larry Bird, Dennis Johnson, Robert Nash, Kevin McHale, and Baltimore's Reggie Lewis. Baltimore's Reggie Lewis He was a quiet guy, but he became my friend. One of those people I could talk to. After all, the NBA was and is a complicated environment, and I was learning things about it just as Reggie was doing as a rookie. I was soon hired to also write about the Showtime Lakers, led by Magic Johnson, and got to witness his amazing wisdom in all its glory. I do have to say that I was immediately struck with what a different vibe the Lakers were in Los Angeles, Hollywood crowd. Actually, the first game where I got to interview Magic and do some things happened at the old sports arena in Los Angeles. After the game, all the media were there, seated in the chair, and all of the writers had gathered around me. And there was Connie Chung on her knees interviewing him. And I had just never seen anything quite like that. But Magic, Hollywood, hard to describe what a figure he was unless you look at Lansing, Michigan, where he was a teenager. And his impact was astounding. I spent a lot of time documenting it in this book. One of the reasons I was so interested in putting it together, I was a 24-year-old varsity head coach at Blacksburg High School in Virginia. And I had so many amazing kids. And I knew that before that, I had been an assistant football coach at Peabody Junior High, old school for Moses Malone. And I had been through that experience and had learned so much. And so I was eager to go back. It was a time of great turbulence, great racial division. And I wanted to look at that because that is all Magic Johnson came of age in. I also continued to write about the Celtics for 5 years. It was devastating, of course. In 1993, we lost Reggie. It was also in 1993 that the Chicago Tribune book division hired me to write about the Bulls. And I wrote our equation. An amazing experience to write about. It was like being transported into another universe. If I thought LA was one thing, Michael, old Chicago Stadium was quite another thing. It was astounding. And I soon grew at that time. I was learning the NBA as I went. And the thing, when I look back, what an environment testosterone in the NBA is. It is populated by really large people, really talented people, athletic. It's certainly a hard arena to dominate. I've seen some dominating figures like that way, giving just about everybody reason for pause. When I got to start spending some time, I became good friends with Tex Winter, and I got to start spending some time with Jackson. He pointed out you can't imagine stuff you would like. Now, I've had some conversations with Pat Riley. I'm pretty sure he would say the same thing about walking with the great Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Magic Johnson and that team. fortunate to spend a lot of time with a lot of the greatest teams in the game. But the great Tex Winter was, I later introduced him to Kobe Bryant before he actually coached. I was rebounding free throws for Kobe after one practice in 1999. Kobe told me he always dreamed about being coached by the great Tex Winter. I told him, Texas, my buddy, I'll get him to call me. Of course, in trouble because you can't have an assistant coach. Tex was still working at the Bulls, calling the young star of another team. Not like that. Kobe and Tex Winter I know everything I did in basketball. The fact that I introduced Kobe Bryant to Tex Winter, and Kobe declared that Tex Winter was his Yoda, and they were inseparable the whole time, and still fighting over basketball many nights, fussing with each other. I also introduced just a quick slide. By the way, don't you love the picture? Doesn't it look a lot like me? There I am. There I am on press row in Boston Garden, 1988. Yes, that was 1988, Boston Garden. I had hair. You think back on hair. Yes, yes. Yeah. But the photographer Steve Leposki worked with him a lot. He did the cover of the Jordan book, which is 22 languages all over the world. He did the cover of the Kobe book. This fabulous cover. It's actually taken out of a photo of Magic's scoring with all the Celtics around him, trying to reach the Magic's shot in Boston Garden. So Steve has always done the iconic photos, and he had that one of me. I'm actually in the photo looking at a newspaper. We don't do that much anymore. But as I said, Tex Winter changed my life. He was not only Kobe's Yoda, he was mine too. In fact, he had that triangle offense. That was an amazing thing. It's sort of been outlawed in today's NBA. They changed all the rules, the timeline, the reset clock. You really don't have time to run an offense like the triangle. I think the NBA is probably going to change that. But I was a youth coach. I had been a high school varsity head coach, but by the mid '90s, I was coaching youth sports, AAU, and just regular youth club sports. And I wanted to run the triangle with my youth team because if I'm going to write about it, I want to know how it works. And I had Tex Winter anytime I needed. He was always handing me stuff, telling me stuff, and so it was a fascinating thing to have him be able to run that triangle. Boy, the kids could read. I would break it down and keep it simple. Like Reggie Lewis, Tex became the friend who explained so much about the Bulls as Reggie did about the Celtics, as did Phil Jackson and Jordan himself. I had access to that presidential, and I worked for 6 seasons. I wrote a variety of books about the Bulls. The big one was Blood on the Hearts, about the breakup of the Bulls in 1998. And the director of the Last Dance docuseries, how many of you have seen that? Jordan, the director of that said, my two books, Michael Jordan Life, his Bibles for making that series. All the things I did in the 90s with the Bulls became the basis for me writing and publishing a little brand, Michael Jordan, The Life. And this fall, my Jordan book will be published in German. Last year it was in Portuguese. German is the 22nd language that Michael Jordan, the life is in. My Kobe book's in 12. Magic has already been licensed in 8 languages. Now, how many of those people in those foreign countries do you think are intrigued by me? No. I'm some name on the cover. What is amazing, what is truly powerful, and I guess I'll put it this way. These players are not just athletes. Far from it. They are huge cultural figures as well. They're successful businessmen. Now, how successful? Well, the week back in October that Magic Johnson became a billionaire, the BBC had me on to talk about that on worldwide television. Now, I'm as much of a nobody as anybody else, but they had me on to talk about it. And of course, Michael and Magic, quote, love each other, but they've been fighting over this shoe thing for 30 some years, more, 40 years. And of course, wouldn't you know it, Magic has had to work incredibly hard. And I mean, he has done amazing things as a businessman. But at the point he just got to 1 billion a week earlier, Michael announced he was worth how much? 3 billion. And so they had their competition as players. They were not quite the same generation. A lot of people don't know this, but who was Michael Jordan's hero in high school? No, it was Michael Jordan called himself Magic Mike. He liked to go into practice at Laney High School and throw those magic no-look passes. Michael Jordan had a vanity plate for his very first car, and he rode all over Wilmington, North Carolina, his hometown, telling the world he was Magic Mike. He got to Chapel Hill that late summer of 1981. And Dean Smith said, I don't know about this Magic Mike thing. You might want to lose that. We already got one Magic. And of course, it was a smart move for Michael to get out of the way of that. But those guys, they've been going at it. And of course, Magic and Larry, Kareem, those guys, they got shoe contracts in the day when, wow, they were getting tens of thousands of dollars. Well, of course, not only did Michael get this incredible contract, but he got a percentage. The first player ever to do so. He was selling so many shoes. Phil Knight, the chairman of Nike, wanted to get rid of him. They couldn't deal with the overflow of shoes, and it was dangerous. They were having had all these shoes made and shipped to the country, these Air Jordan shoes. And we have the film Air, and it sounds like things are fairly sweet. What you don't know is that Phil Knight fired Sonny Vaccaro after all the stuff he did to get the Air Jordan thing going. But everybody, all these older players in the NBA were just really upset that this young guy Jordan had this contract. It drove Magic nuts. Jordan has charisma. Magic had, as Jerry West said, I don't care who you're talking about. There's nobody's ever had the charisma that Magic Johnson had. Not Michael, not any of these guys. But you know what it all comes down to? And this is why I love what I do. It comes down to their mothers. As Sonny Vaccaro said, Dolores Jordan, Michael's mother, is one of the single most impressive people he'd ever met in his life. And Sonny's my friend. He calls me all the time. Well, not all the time, once every 6 to 12 months or so. That's a lot for me. But the point in all this is there's Dolores Jordan. Michael, as a typical young guy, didn't even want to go to Oregon to meet with Nike. But Dolores Jordan, her father, was a tough sharecropper. You want to know how tough he was? There was a 1922 study of the Board of Agriculture in North Carolina that said it didn't matter, sharecroppers, black or white. Guess what? None of them ever made any money. It was a cheating game, robbing people of every race. But Michael Jordan's grandfather, Dolores's father, Old Man Peoples, they called him. He not only came to own his own land and farmed for himself, he had a much bigger house. Everybody, all black or white, all the farmers back then were moonshiners in North Carolina. That was their cash crop. So he not only had a job, he not only had his own land, he not only had his own moonshine operation, but Dolores had learned very well the business of economics. Now, Magic Johnson has a magnificent mother as well. Christine Porter was her maiden name. And she also was a magnificent figure in his life, but she didn't care about money. Her main thing, she was concerned about her son, Irvin Jr.'s spiritual life. And as I point out in the book Magic, and I talked about Michael and his mother in that book, but I talked about both women in Magic. Who is to say really which one is right? You're going to be worried about your child's spiritual well-being, or you're going to be worried about your child's wealth. Well, those two women were magnificent figures in their own right. It's been my thing over the years to really start to dig into families, into family history. And there's a reason I do that. When I started the Michael Jordan book in 2011, I went down to Duplin County, North Carolina, to another library. And Duplin was where the Jordans lived before they moved to Wilmington. And they lived and were sharecroppers in that community. And so I went to the library and I got out all the history books. And I started going through the history books and reading and looking and reading. I couldn't find a sentence even about a single black person for the entire history of North Carolina. And I'm sitting there, I'm in disbelief. I am in disbelief sitting in this library. And I look up and the librarian is a black lady. And I go up and I say to her, I've been through all your North Carolina history books. You wouldn't know a black person was a part of North Carolina. Yeah, I mean, it's just nothing. And she had one of the saddest looks cross her face when I said that. She said, I want you to come meet my father tonight. He's in the hospital. And so I went to the hospital that night, and there was her father. He had been a sharecropper with the Jordans. He knew them well, all of Michael's ancestors. An important thing when you are studying great Americans, you want to study their people. It's part of greatness. Not only had he been a sharecropper, he had gone to school and gotten his degrees, and he had taught history for years at North Carolina Central. This was one of the most powerful interviews. And I've done a lot of things. I was a night police reporter. I covered murder trials. I have done a lot of different types of reporting, but the interview that night with this former sharecropper who became a scholar, who was in the hospital, and he was loved in that community. That was one of the most humbling things of my career. But it made me realize the depths of this problem. And so as Cleve pointed out, I've had some wonderful reviews of this book. There's some other people don't like it because they just don't want to deal with a lot of history. I understand that. And that's not all white people. There are also Black people. This is a painful history we have. But, I began the Jordan book a decade ago. It's now been out 10 years. I worked on the Magic book for 5 years. The data mining, to go back to the data for each state, all the public records, all the census records, all the ways of tracking people. It's notorious to often try to track the family histories of Black people. It's also difficult for white people too, but nothing like the difficulty for Black people. It's not even close. But suddenly, I was able to trace Magic Johnson's people back to the 1830s, to this plantation owned by these very wealthy, powerful people in North Carolina. Do you put that in a basketball book? How many of you think that belongs in a basketball book? Others think not. I understand. If I hadn't had that day in that library in North Carolina where there wasn't even a word in the history books, I probably would have left it out. But I learned amazing things about us as a people. I learned so many things. My head is still spinning. And yes, I did the same thing when I did the Jerry West book. I traced his people back. His people went to Jamestown. Lord De La Warr, Thomas West, that's Jerry West's ancestor. Now, De La Warr, how powerful was he? De La Warr became Delaware River, Delaware State, Delaware Nation of Native Americans. Jerry West people, they were this big, powerful founding family. Unfortunately, Jerry West's line about 3 or 4 grandfathers back got kicked out of the family, and they ended up in West Virginia as dirt scratching hillbillies. But the point in all this is, these are important stories, and the history of Magic Johnson's family is the history of a great American. And the formative things from those families. Magic Johnson had a great aunt that was married to a state senator. It appears that his great grandfather was a sergeant in the 1st Colored Cavalry. Now, they weren't, in the Civil War, they weren't giving rank to Black males. He was a sergeant. And so my point is, you can dig into just about every Black family in America. You're going to find amazing and powerful things. And I'm a big believer in that history. I'm a big believer that it's a powerful, powerful thing for us. And I say us. And I mean us. That's why I love my work. You can argue that the story of Black Americans is the premier story of American freedom. Can you think of one that that rivals it? I don't think so. It's important to all of us, and we should revere it and treasure it. That's part of the reason. I've also noticed, because I've used family history in my Kobe Bryant book. His family did amazing things in Philadelphia. They were the heart of a Catholic church there, and his great grandfather set up a whole program that this black Catholic church in Philadelphia had an amazing array of social programs, and Kobe's great grandfather set up the store that funded all those programs. Everywhere you turn, I don't care. You scratch the surface and you find American greatness. I bounced back and forth. Celtics, the Detroit Pistons. Joe Dumars was my dear friend with the Pistons. All these teams, I was writing about them. In 1989, I was writing the history of the NBA Finals. I don't know if you know much about the Lakers, but Jerry West with Elgin Baylor had a team that went to the NBA Finals Championship Series 6 times. How many times did they lose to Bill Russell and the Celtics? Every time they played, right through 1969. Jerry West and Elgin Baylor. It drove, Jerry West is, he's a very complicated guy. Pat Williams, the guy who used to run the Sixers, he ran the Bulls before that. He ran Orlando Magic. He told me Jerry West is the most complicated figure to ever walk this earth. And so I'm there in this hotel room in Dallas. Jerry West is my father's hero. They're both guys from West Virginia playing basketball. He loved Jerry West. So I'm excited. I'm just thinking, boy, I wish my old man could be with me here while I'm interviewing the great Jerry West. So I start asking him about the 62 championship series, which Frank Selvey missed a last-minute shot. They could have won the first one with the Celtics. They lost in the last second. He's getting twisted up. And I'm younger then. I'm sort of naive. And then I ask him about the 63 loss, and he gets twisted up again. And I didn't realize this till looking back on it later, but I asked poor Jerry West in that hotel room in Dallas to describe for me in detail those championship losses. The poor man, I can't believe I did this to him. The poor man was a wreck. We did it over 2 days. It was the ultimate test of what a gentleman he is of the Southern Appalachians that he didn't throw me out of that hotel room. Elgin Baylor retired. The Lakers finally won in 1972. And so these are the epic kinds of stories. I'm writing about, and I'm supposed to have a clock here that tells me if I'm close to running past my time. It said 7:37 for a while now, or I may be misreading it, but okay, good. How much time do I have left? Oh, okay, good. Then I can go ahead talking about this stuff. Am I wearing you guys out with it? Okay. But this great pain of Jerry West, it has never gone away. It has been his perpetual torture. He took West Virginia University to the 1959 NCAA championship game. He was playing Pete Newell and the University of California, little bitty West Virginia. Jerry West, did anybody know what position he played in college? He was a forward, a 6'2" forward. He averaged 15 rebounds a game. He was and remains to this day a basketball maniac in some ways. And he got that they were down 71-70. And that guy down at the University of Alabama just retired recently. What's that guy's name? Pardon? No, I mean this is a great coach. What's this guy's name? Nick Saban. He was like I was. He was an 8-9-year-old when Jerry West was playing that game. Nick Saban would watch Jerry West through the spindles at the West Virginia University Fieldhouse. Nick Saban is another insane perfectionist like Jerry West. Nick Saban could recall that score 71-70, etched in his brain. And Jerry West said, I had the ball in my hands. I was almost across half court. I had one last shot, but it wasn't to be. I couldn't get the shot off in time. And he looked at me, and this is a guy who is the NBA logo. He said, and my career's always been on the tragic side of things. And I thought about that, and I said, that sounds probably to everyday folks like you and me, that sounds a little crazy. On the other hand, if you're Jerry West and your team's lost 6 times to the Celtics, I guess that's pretty tragic. And to Bill Russell, and Jerry West was having a retirement night, and Bill Russell paid his own airfare to go out and hug Jerry and say good things about him and get one final laugh at the Celtics beating the Lakers again. Anyway, along comes this guy, Magic Johnson. Jerry West is the executive helping to run the Lakers. And Magic comes in, and right from the very start, I was thinking this. His great-great-great-grandfather was a sergeant in the 1st Colored Cavalry. You know what the cavalry does? The cavalry, they blow the bugle and you're in trouble. Here comes the cavalry to save you. Think about that. Well, in 1979, the TV ratings for NBA regular season games had plummeted 27%. Think about that. Anything falls 27%, they're closing down factories, right? Wherever we are in America. NBA ratings fell 27%. It was dire circumstances. Here comes Magic Johnson with this marvelous racehorse basketball, just like the cavalry. He changes everything. Now, I wanted to document this, and I wanted to document Magic. They say the Isabel Wilkerson, the great Black writer, once worked for the New York Times. She's written a variety of books. Any of you read them? Yeah. And she's written a lot about the Great Migration. And it's the vast underreported story of the age. The violence in the South was so horrific, so shameful, that it forced millions of Americans to pack up and leave. Not just the physical murderous violence, but the economic violence of the South. All of that created this great migration that really altered things. It forced people out of their homes, out of their neighborhoods. It divided families. It was the great heartbreak. And so what I wanted to do was look, because there were key men from Mississippi in Magic Johnson's life. And I wanted to reconstruct all of this. I wanted to get the detail of how we were in that integration moment. What really happened? What was the miracle that Magic Johnson produced that helped heal a city's racial wounds? And so I wanted to know all of that. But the 3 men from Mississippi, His own father, Irvin Sr., had come out of Mississippi. The school psychologist, Dr. Charles Tucker, who later became Magic's representative. And the school psychologist was his basketball buddy. They played basketball everywhere. Charles Tucker ascended to the top of basketball agents. All the while, he still works today. Charles Tucker still works today as a psychologist for the Lansing schools. But the third guy, I just discovered him by accident. He was a high school salutatorian in Mississippi, Okolona. And he won a scholarship from the Pepsi company to go to college for free. Dr. Matthew Prophet, he's known today, Colonel Matthew Prophet. Well, the only stipulation for the Pepsi company was that Matthew Prophet had to get the local mayor to sign off on the scholarship. Guess what happened? The mayor looked at him and said, "Son, I'm not signing that. You'll take a scholarship away from a deserving white person." Now, good fortune would have it that Matthew Prophet had 6 aunts, count them, 6 aunts who were college graduates, educators. They paid his way to Howard. He was drafted out of Howard in 1950 as a college junior. OCS right away, immediately a lieutenant, immediately in charge of an ammo dump. He even demanded to have an integrated unit. He went on to serve combat tours, Matthew Prophet did, in Korea extensively, Vietnam extensively. He left the Army in 1970, went to Northwestern University, earned a PhD in education, and he arrived at Lansing as the deputy superintendent of schools. Lo and behold, Lansing was a community determined to do an amazing and powerful and important thing. It was determined to empower Black males. And this former colonel, he later became the superintendent of the Portland, Oregon schools. He just died. I did hours and hours of interviews with him. And he was there. They were putting Magic Johnson in position as a young man to cure all the racial battles caused by busing at Everett High School. Am I out of time? And so I've gotten to know, Dr. Matthew Prophet, his children, his cousins, the whole family could have its own, it could have its own Mensa chapter. And Dr. Prophet, just an honor to interview him. But these 3 guys from Mississippi set the stage for good things to happen in the schools. And the reason they set that stage is that they pulled in, they weren't telling Magic this. They just knew if they put him in place at Everett High School, that good things would happen. And, my wife knows me so well. I have all this stuff I wanted to tell you. I didn't get to a lot of it, but it's probably a good thing. But I will say this. All of that is how I ended up with a 700 plus page book. I wrote this a 700 page book about Michael Jordan. Like I said, it has probably been through 150 printings. But I think we're at that time where if you have some questions, obviously I have no trouble running my mouth. Yes, sir. Wow. Well, Bill Lambier is the worst. That's easy. they're also interesting in their own way. Michael Jordan loved his father dearly, but his whole mojo was wired by the fatherly disapproval that he received as a little fella. Michael, of course, had an older brother, Larry, about 10, 11 months older. They battled every day in basketball. Larry, short and muscular. Michael, a year younger, but taller, skinnier. And the whole mojo for Michael Jordan. And, you know, my old man had been burned horribly. I was always kind of aware that you know, I was not a good student at Virginia Military Institute. I never had a 2.0 average. I graduated with a 1.996. I served 3.5 years of barracks confinement there. Terrible cadet, terrible student. And of course, Dr. Knapp, a VMI grad as well. He of course acquitted himself. And I have a grandson there. I'll have to brag him in it. He had a 3.83 his first semester. And I told him, you could have added my first 3 semesters together. I wouldn't have had a 3.83 if you'd added. And I wasn't overstating the case. I was terrible. But my father really loved me. He did not approve of me. I was a goofball. And he was a basketball guy. I was a football guy. But I would say Michael, powerful. I mean, he made people all over the world. Nobody cared about American basketball. Now they started to. Magic and Larry had done the trick. But I mean, Michael elevated things. He made people all over the globe care. You know, I have a son-in-law who's wrapping up his PhD at Harvard, and I got to say this, in Japanese studies. They're over in Japan, and he's over there studying the samurai and all this stuff. And he sent me these pictures. I was finishing up the magic book, and he sent me these pictures from this samurai graveyard. You know, and they really worship the warriors and in Japan. And they sent me these pictures in the early morning from the samurai graveyard, and it hit me like somebody I'd walked in front of a beer truck. Think about this. We have all of, and thank goodness that our warrior heroes today don't have long swords running around beheading people. Our heroes globally today, if you think about this, they are American basketball players. Now, let's go a step further. They are not just American basketball players. They are black males. That is a powerful, powerful statement about, and it's not about basketball. You cannot just play basketball. The NBA is an environment. You got to be a really, really sharp person to compete at that level. That, you know, they're just not going to be anything. And to do what they have accomplished in business, and Magic Johnson building his businesses based on black consumer preference, and all of these things are really black driven efforts. This is not Magic Johnson being the face of some other operation. Peter Guber, who's became Magic's partner in sports franchises. He gave me a long interview. He was in '93. He was the head of Sony, and Magic called him and said, "I want to take a meeting." No, Magic. Magic shows up with his black money guy, and they lay out the fact that if you build theaters in black neighborhoods, most underserved neighborhoods in America. And not only did they have the idea, they had all the numbers. And Goober looked at it. He had his numbers people look at it. These 2 black guys sold Sony. And guess what those theaters did as soon as they opened? Sort of like Oprah's book club. What happened to the numbers? Through the roof. And so this is not about, I mean, it is about basketball because let's face it, every other avenue going was shut down, and they tried to shut down basketball. But when you look at the global standard, the image of a warrior, and you probably start poking around as I did with the colonel from Mississippi with the doctorate from Northwestern. You start poking around in many other fields of endeavor. What are you going to find? It's my belief you're going to find the same thing. All kinds of places, name it. And so my point is, what blessed news that these men with their powerful competitive personalities that made them very powerful businessmen, driven along by their very powerful mothers in their own right and their very powerful fathers. Magic Johnson, who just lost his father, just the stories of how his father went through all of Magic's major decisions. Should I leave college? Which college should I go? Magic was always trying to do business on the side. He was working from that auto in Lansing. He was breaking his back to turn out 20,000 a year to feed his family. He had a big family. Farm families were big in those days. You would think, oh, you know, I'm going to live off the sun. Get going, man. Get in the pros. His father was slow walking it with Dr. Charles. When you think about that, what happened? Magic Johnson was supposed to go to the Kansas City Chiefs in 1978 off season. He offered him, I mean, in 78 to offer millions. He was like, what? That's huge money. I know it's making 10,000 a year, coaching 2 varsity sports, and had no health insurance. Was a college teacher at that age. I mean, a high school teacher. And Urban Senior had a tough time. He did everything possible to prevent his son from turning pro. Guess what happened that next year? Here come Magic Johnson. Here comes this Larry Bird guy. Everybody thought Larry Bird was black. We didn't have a lot of people. Eventually got the idea. But the whole thing was they had that meeting in the 1979 NCAA championship game. Black guy, white guy. Both of them played a lot of the same style, all the ball moving, big man handling things. Was watched. Okay. Best ratings. NBA. Here come these two dudes on a coin flip. Thought he was going to be. He was happy to play with Gilmore Magic was. He's in LA. Larry Bird, the Red Auerbach, fooled everybody. He got Larry Bird signed early to Boston. You know how that unfolds. It's a great American story. It's an important American story. It's the beginning of things. It's the beginning of relationships. It's the beginning of understanding. I wish we had something like it. This is a country begging, dying, crying to understand. Okay. Oh no! But now his agent did, and he agreed to. Magic did. He's a friendly guy. You know who really see me is my great wife. She went through and digitized all my tapes from 1990s the pandemic. And there I had all these conversations with Magic that I'd never used because back then you got a cassette tape. I was doing so many projects. I was running from one thing to another. I couldn't find half the stuff I had on the tape. you gotta fast forward and go all the way through it, reverse it, trying to find, and the publisher's got to have it. So I'd never even heard of the conversations I'd had with her, and she digitized it. Boom, I could search right there. So she's the hero. But and I'm sorry, I need to answer your question. This is where I get. What were you asking? Just oh no, he magic ultimately couldn't do it, and I explained this in the afterword of the book. Now, Lon Rosen, his agent and friend of many years, and Dr. Charles Tucker, I did 50 interviews each with his two high school coaches. I did the same amount with Dr. Charles Tucker. I did the same. Lon Rosen probably 100 with him, and I was just going back, checking and rechecking, and getting. It was almost like archaeology. It's like pottery, shards of pottery. I'm trying to put together this whole story of the integration moment. And the thing that came out of it was the amazing thing by these power. To me, it just, I mean, it just, I'm a matter of fact guy. I don't, I don't try to put a rosy spin on anything. Because I'm very frank about magic sex life, and nobody's asked about that. But I just lay out the evidence. I mean, I don't really care about a sex life, but I have to explain it in terms of this wonderful life. And it is, I mean, it's also a human spectacle. But everything I find in the record, Lansing, Michigan, empowered black at every turn, every way possible. They rewarded Lansing by doing not just the right thing, they did the great. And it was when nobody was looking, when they were just trying to move the world along to a better place. And it was some of the most fun I've ever had in writing to answer your question, to look at how Irvin Sr. handled and guided his son and refused to tell him what to do. And Irvin grew up as a man. Young Irvin grew up as a man because he knew what his father wanted. And his father wouldn't tell him. And he chose to honor his father. And think about it, they changed global history. If Irvin Johnson had gone to the Kansas City Kings, there'd have been no NCAA championship game between Larry and Magic. There would have been that set the stage for what the NBA became. American basketball out of that. David Stern ascended things. What happens in 84, Larry? And then the whole place was fine. You know, guy. He was like, what's your, you know, they wanted that 7 seconds or less in Phoenix. You think they shaved the top off, they shaved everything off. You can run the track. Honestly, usually with stuff players, players, all-star games. And we could allow the 1997 to 2015. You could not. The rules are different. Where would be the used to have the rules? All rules do. It's the maybe the one that's all the game because it would make it terrible. Now, all the crowds are waiting for the singing something. Create more inside. So, so it is great. You know, you have a saying, you want to get away and spend a little time alone. Real good time. You guys have kept me company tonight. I feel a deep gratitude for that. Three. What wants me to retire? What the amazing story? Uh, you, Kobe Bryant, just one it's always like but his father says back in the village, the school gym is 16, 17. He just went from court to like 6, they go it's a true coming of age story. It's been very traumatic.
Or Marion.
Yeah. And, it's not he's so much better. It's powerful. Which
I want to take this moment to thank our author, Roland Lazenby. I will say, if you're not a basketball fan, then if this hasn't gotten you curious, then you're never going to be curious about basketball. Roland, I'll be honest, Roland. I can see where you are a coach. I would run through that door for you right now. I absolutely adored that. I will say the one team you did not talk about, 1983 Philadelphia 76ers. Yeah, well, they swept the Lakers in four. Swept the Lakers in four. Yeah. So I had to rep my team. But anyway, again, thank you, Roland. I really appreciate it. Please buy books from Snug Books out front, and Roland will be happy to sit here, talk basketball, talk American history, and sign your book.